Welcome into the Talkin Tide podcast on the Belly Up Sports Network. I'm Chase Goodbread, sports columnist with the Tuscaloosa News, joined as always by Travis Reier, the senior analyst at BamaOnline.com. A lot to get into in this edition of Talkin Tide. Of course, you can get us on Twitter. Talkin_Tide is the Twitter feed. Want to thank a quick sponsor. That would be Peterbrook Chocolatier of Tuscaloosa. More on Peterbrook a little bit later in the program. And of course, wherever you like to get your podcast, you can get Talkin Tide. That would include Apple Podcasts. And of course, we're live on YouTube and Facebook as well. You can get playbacks, of course, on Facebook and YouTube too. So check us out. Give us a like, give us a subscribe, all that stuff. Travis, we dive in here talking Alabama football in between scrimmage number 2 and A-Day. Of course, A-Day will be coming up Saturday. We'll be talking about that a little bit later in the program. But second scrimmage now in the books was held on Saturday, Travis. Pretty nice weather, by the way, in Tuscaloosa for that one. And Nick Saban post-scrimmage, of course, once again, close to media, although a few birds were singing, Travis, as usual, who got into this particular scrimmage. But your thoughts on what you heard and from Nick Saban and elsewhere on this second run through?
Yeah, you start with the quarterback position, obviously, as Jalen Milroe, Ty Simpson continue to work through that competition. You still got a couple of early enrollees, too, that you heard a few things about. Dylan Lonergan, also Eli Holstein in that mix. But primarily those first two guys, as we expected. And from what I can gather, they kind of come out of these first two scrimmages the way they went in. It was almost a default status going into spring with Milroe first up, followed by Ty Simpson. But from what I can gather and what I can get from Nick Saban and those bits and pieces anyway, it sounds like it's still in that sort of a scenario. Not finished by any means, but heard some good things, heard some not so good things. Heard Nick Saban allude to that where the quarterback position was concerned on Saturday at Bryant-Denny Stadium. So continued quest for consistency on a down in and down out basis. I think both those quarterbacks have shown some flashes of being the guy. I think it's filling in those gaps a little bit better. That's ultimately going to determine that situation. And then Justice Haynes, obviously, just even from Nick Saban's comments post scrimmage, that's going to be a runaway hype train. It might be. Now they've got other backs. I mean, they still have Jace McClellan, still have Roydell Williams, still have Jam Miller. So as we both know, they like to use multiple backs. But boy, it sounds like Justice Haynes is everything he was billed to be coming over from the state of Georgia.
Yeah, I was told he looked outstanding in the scrimmage. As for Milroe, I was told Milroe kind of came out like a house on fire and was extremely effective early in the scrimmage, maybe faded a little bit later. I heard there was a pick six for Milroe. Also heard that wasn't altogether on him. So, again, we're not there, Travis. These are just things you hear from people who are. And therefore, there are things that I may have described differently had I seen with my own eyes. But those are just a few of the things that I was told. The offensive line, especially that right side with Tyler Booker and J.C. Latham, apparently looking very strong and paving the way for those aforementioned running backs. And again, Alabama, as was the case in scrimmage number 1, a little shorthanded on the defensive side of the ball, maybe not quite as much as they were a week ago, but Chris Braswell apparently still out, Travis, from what I understand. So you got to factor that into what you hear about the offensive line, right?
You do. Dallas Turner's still out, obviously. Deontay Lawson. So there's still some notable absences for Alabama on that side of the ball. But, yeah, I mean, what you liked hearing from Nick Saban post-scrimmage in terms of the identity of this team, especially from a leadership perspective to this point, has been the offensive line, which makes sense because you've got a J.C. Latham that's back as a starter. You've got Seth McLaughlin, Darian Dalcourt have played a lot of football. Tyler Booker played a lot of football last year. as a true freshman, which kind of moves you to that left tackle position and Elijah Pritchett. Kind of a mixed bag from what I understand. Not a big surprise with Elijah Pritchett because this guy missed time in the fall. He had that torn pec last summer in the lead up to the preseason. So, you think about it, it's still in some ways for Elijah Pritchett, it's the period where you're still adapting to football at this level, while also being very much in the mix for a starting job. And so, but yeah, I thought as an extension of the offensive line, Nick talking about the running back position and the physicality, and I like that he threw Kendrick Law in there too, because Kendrick Law is first and foremost an all-around football player. He plays wide receiver, but this is a guy that you see on a lot of special teams. This is a guy who doesn't have a problem with perimeter blocking. This is a guy who doesn't have a problem with contact, yards after the catch, those type of things. So it's always good to see a guy like that get noticed, especially when we haven't talked about him as much in relation to the top 3 or 4 wide receivers to this point.
Yeah, Kendrick Law, apparently a strong scrimmage for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Isaiah Bond, I was told, did a really nice job of getting open, but did have a couple of drops for Alabama. He'll be one to watch as well. Nick Saban mentioned that Bond overall is having a pretty good spring the other day. I don't think it was Saturday. But back quickly to the offensive line, Travis, and then we'll kind of leave that topic after that. But, we talked, in February, March, kind of leading into spring practice about the possibility of J.C. Latham making that move from the right side to the left side. We've seen it happen before with other Alabama offensive tackles. They go from right to left and then to the NFL. It's been a progression, not for all of them, but for some of them. Your thoughts? Apparently that's not happening. Got Aiden up here in about 5-6 days. So it sounds like for whatever reason, the players, the coaching staff, or both for now are more comfortable just letting Latham continue to work on that right side where he's got a whole lot of experience and expose Pritchett on that left side.
Yeah, and look, I think the foregone conclusion maybe in some corners was that Caden Proctor's coming in as a 5-star. This is a guy that physically, just when you look at Caden Proctor, you think, yeah, he's a plug and play as a true freshman. We've seen Alabama do it in the past. We can name 3, 4, 5 different guys that have done it. But Elijah Pritchett's a legitimate guy, and so I wasn't that surprised that they started spring that way. But sure, given J.C. Latham's sort of experience there at left tackle, going back to his days even at the prep level, yeah, you kind of figured that it'd be an Evan Neal type of move here most recently. But it hasn't, as you said, it hasn't happened yet. And, something we seldom see with Alabama offensive lines, especially when there's a couple of 3 pieces that have to be replaced, is that one group that opens spring going wire to wire to the season opener, right? Usually there's some different combinations with that first group as you go through spring scrimmages and into fall camp scrimmages. But maybe this is going to be the exception. I'll still be a little bit surprised if that is the case. But if it is, that means you're in a pretty good spot. If Elijah Pritchett's capable of jumping right in there in year 2 and nailing down that left tackle position to the point where you feel good about keeping J.C. Latham on the right side, I'd say you're in good shape.
If this offensive line, Travis, looks like it's going to be a real tone setter, which I know is what this coaching staff is for, and could really spring these running backs to – obviously that's what you wanted for no other reason that you're going to have an inexperienced quarterback who needs manageable third downs as much as possible. That goes without saying. But when you talk about the read option game with Milroe, he's so dynamic as an athlete, and we've talked about this. If the backs can pick up yards with this offensive line, you got to think that makes Milroe and the read option all the more a dangerous aspect potentially for this offense. You wonder if things are a dead heat with he and Simpson, if that could create an edge.
It could, and that's sort of been my expectation since the hiring of Tommy Rees, there was this sort of belief, I think, from some that Tommy Rees is all under center. They're going to be all under center. They're going to be 3 tight ends, and they're just going to phone booth it. And they're going to do some of the multiple tight ends, there's no doubt. But watching his offense at Notre Dame, they were gun-oriented a lot, which means they were running a lot of zone read. And Tyler Buckner, the quarterback at Notre Dame, in the Gator Bowl game that I watched with South Carolina, was very effective, very much more so quality over quantity. I still don't think, even if it is Jalen Milroe at quarterback, that they're going to dial up a Jalen Hurts type of run load for him from 2016 or something like that. But I can see him being, somewhere close to double digits carries per game if he is the guy. And I think Ty Simpson can carry that out. Maybe not to the game-breaking extent that Milroe can with that speed of his, but again, he can be more than adequate in the zone read game, and and make good use of those backs working behind that offensive line. And they got like 7 scholarship tight ends right now too. That in the something else we may get into, the transfer portal window, as we know, opened again on Saturday. So you get through A-Day next Saturday. It's going to be interesting to see how much movement you have for this Alabama team.
Yeah, you got to think Nick Saban and any other coach who had a scrimmage on April or a spring game on April 15th didn't exactly love the timing, Travis, for that window, that portal window, just thrown open on the day somebody may or may not like how much they played in a scrimmage.
Yeah, those coaches that had
how
the
about
spring
that for
games.
timing?
Coaches had the spring games. This weekend, they came back into the office today, and it's a bit drafty in here. Well, it was that portal window that was wide open, a little drafty.
Absolutely. To your point about the tight ends, though, and what Tommy Rees is maybe looking at in terms of, sets and whatnot, formations. My understanding is they ran a lot of 11 personnel in the second scrimmage on Saturday. A lot of one back, one tight end, did go to double tights, like when you'd expect it to in short yardage and goal line, that kind of thing. But, for regular downs between the 20s, sounds to me like they were running a lot of 3 wideouts out there.
It is still the Alabama offense. And the Alabama offense is always going to have 11 personnel, which is 3 wide receivers. You don't go out and hit the junior college ranks for a guy like Malik Benson if you're doing away with 11 personnel. You don't continue to turn over rocks to find high-level wide receiver talent if you're getting away from 11 personnel. There's going to be 12 personnel. There's going to be 2 tight end sets. There always has been under Nick Saban. But there's going to be a mix. I don't think that's going to change. And, I do think the personnel will dictate play sequencing more so than just a preference or kind of a background of an offensive coordinator. Yeah, you're going from Bryce Young to either Jalen Milroe or Ty Simpson. So guess what? You probably are going to run it to throw it more with these guys than you did with that last guy, because you didn't really have to run it all that much for Bryce Young to be really good.
That's right. And I'll tell you too, not that this is ever not the case, but if you can block as a wide receiver, it's especially this particular coming fall, it's going to bode well for playing time for you.
And that's where I think Kendrick Law is going to be one of those guys, because it's not that I don't think he can be an Ardarius Stewart type or a John Mechie type as a receiver. I think he can be. But we talked about this many times last season. Their perimeter blocking in 2022 wasn't up to the standard, because they struggled. And it also had something to do with they didn't have those 1 or 2 true playmakers that could score from anywhere on the field on any touch. But they didn't block. I didn't think anyway, like they had in some previous years. So that's where you're right. Absolutely. A guy like Kendrick Law, that's going to help keep him towards the top of that rotation.
The Talkin Tide podcast on the Belly Up Podcast Network. I want to thank sponsor really quickly, Peterbrook Chocolatier of Tuscaloosa. Travis, tell them all about it.
Peterbrook Chocolatier out there at 1530 McFarland Boulevard North in the Indian Hills section of Tuscaloosa. We got you through Easter. We're getting you ready for Mother's Day coming up just around the corner. And I'll tell you something else. You need to go ahead when you get a chance. It's never too early to start planning those summer events and those summer camps for the little ones, right? And the great thing about Peterbrook Chocolatier is they have those camps. But hey, if you're a grown-up, you're an adult, and you want to go to camp or you want to form a camp, you can do that. Give them a call at 205-752-0211. Talk to Caitlin and the outstanding staff there at Peterbrook Chocolatier. They'll get you set up with your summer camp reservations. Never too early for that. At Peterbrook Chocolatier, 1530 McFarland Boulevard North in the Indian Hills section of Tuscaloosa.
All right, the Talkin Tide podcast on the Belly Up podcast network. I'll get that out here in just a second. Travis, going to look ahead quickly to A-Day here. Reset on that. It's going to be kicking off at 2 p.m. on Saturday. Free admission as always. It'll be televised again, just like last year, Travis, on SEC Network Plus. Gonna be some boomers throwing that remote across the room, Travis. trying to get this streaming going. You know, on Saturday.
There will be. You're right. And the thing
like
is,
us.
I mean, pretty much. I know I'm hardcore ESPN Plus these days because I like that pro golf, and with that ESPN Plus, every week on the PGA Tour, I can pretty much fire that baby up at like 8 or 7. On a Thursday, starting on Thursdays, and I can have the golf on all day long. But yeah, I mean, with the college baseball, you watch, Alabama baseball in there, Alabama softball in there, spring games, and that's pretty much where they're sending you now. I think you had Georgia on ESPN2, and that's going to be it for the SEC teams, on sort of cable or Dish or YouTube TV, whatever you have. So whether you like it or not, you're headed to the strain.
I guess you got to win a crown, Travis, because I think for the last 2 straight years in a row, it's only been Georgia on regular TV.
Right.
And won the last 2 national championships. So,
well, and Prime and Colorado are going to be on ESPN.
Okay,
so
that'll draw. Yeah. They'll have Prime mic'd up, and that'll do good ratings.
Yes.
A lot of people will watch that.
I think so.
No doubt. All right, quickly, what's that?
Go ahead. I'm good.
I was just going to say, quick note on the Walk of Champions ceremony, the captain's ceremony, rather. Will Anderson, Jordan Battle, Bryce Young, Alabama's 2022 captains will get their hands and feet imprinted in that cement over at Denny Chimes. That's going to be going on at about 12:15. And, of course, they'll be kicking off the game, the scrimmage, I guess, rather, around 2 p.m. Things to watch on A-Day, Travis. We touched on the quarterbacks already, but maybe we'll look at a defense here. So we talked a lot of offense when we were talking about the second scrimmage, but the safeties, inside linebackers, pass rushers, who's out there, who's not out there. Just 3 things off the top of my head defensively anyway that'll definitely be worth watching.
Yeah, I want to see the secondary, and typically you won't see dime. You won't see the dime package. It'll be 11 personnel offensively or 12. So, 3rd and 8, 3rd and 10, you won't see a dime. I'd be surprised if you see it at all. But, who are the nickel guys? Because Brian Branch has moved on. Is it Malachi Moore dropping down in that situation, or is it Earl Little? We've heard Terry and Arnold's working inside these days at Star as well. How do those guys? That's a very important position. And how does that sort of pan out? The safeties, Christian Story, Caleb Downs coming in as an early enrollee who looks like he could end up being a starter in year 1 at the safety position to go along with Malachi. Yeah, I'm interested in those combinations between corner, safety, and the sub roles because they've been more 4 safeties the last couple of years when it comes to the 2 safety spots, the nickel and the dime spots. But in the past, they've been 3 corners between the 2 corners and stars. So different ways they can play that, different ways they can look at those combinations. So I'm interested in that. And then just Jaheim Otis inside, who are some other guys that are going to go along with him? There's some guys like Justin Aboigbe you're very happy to have back after his scary situation. Tim Smith, it's time for that to happen at this point. They need some guys to take another step up in terms of negative play production there at those defensive line positions.
Fun to watch those inside linebackers too. Travis Reier getting on action. I expect to see him play a good bit of football with that first group. Also, Jihad Campbell. I think we'll see a lot of him with the ones as well inside. So that's going to be interesting. Of course, Deontay Lawson has been out with an injury. He'll be back in fall camp, and he's the one that's experienced in that group. So that'll change the mix a little bit, certainly. But fun to watch that. I think we'll see a good bit of Earl Little at that star position. But I agree with you. That'll be fun to watch to see how they kind of deal with that. We know Matt got some experience there. He's practiced there, but it sounds as though he's been working more at safety this spring.
Yeah, when they go nickel with that first group, that would be my expectation, which you just sort of outlined there. But Christian Story too at the safety position. I thought Nick had some interesting comments about him going into his final campaign and really talking about him in terms of a starter, but what they're still looking to get from him in terms of consistency. And this is it. We talk about some of those guys up front. Same thing for Christian Story on the back end, and there's roles available. Even if you don't start in the base, depending on how that personnel is juggled when they go nickel and dime, you can find yourself in there like a Hootie Jones in recent years, and some of those other guys that have come on when they start making moves within those sub packages.
No question about it. All right, that is going to do it for this edition of the Talkin Tide podcast on the Belly Up Podcast Network. For Travis Reier, the longtime senior analyst at BamaOnline.com, I'm Chase Goodbread of the Tuscaloosa News and, of course, Crimson Cover Television as well. Be sure to join us next Sunday night. Travis and I will fire it right back up for what will be a recap of A-Day. Look forward to it, and we will talk to you then here on Talkin Tide.